Okay, let us know when you're ready, Greg. Are you ready? Okay. Everyone else good? All right, I think we are officially broadcasting now. So I'll just go ahead and get started then. As soon as I get my bearings here. Here we go. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks and welcome to the Albany City Council special meeting, meeting of a working group to develop community policing and relations task force. This is a virtual meeting. Information about how to join the meeting in various ways is on the website. It's on our website. You can go to the calendar and find the item for today there. It will be slightly a different format of council meeting. Be a little bit more informal, but we will be taking public comment starting at item number 3, which is looks like a sort of a good of the city type item where we would normally take comments for items that are not on this agenda. So I'll just go ahead and kind of informally call us to order. I believe we have the group was to be as agreed to by the council, as voted on by the council. The group was to be comprised of the mayor, the vice mayor, members of the Social and Economic Justice Commission, of which we have 2. We have Chair Downs and Vice Chair Gary, and we also have 2 staff members, the Chief of Police, John Geisberger, and the City Manager, Nicole Amagauer. And I see our consultant has now joined us, Nicole Anderson. So thanks everyone for being here. And I do think we have everyone who is supposed to be in this meeting. I'll go ahead and move on to item 2, the introductions and purpose of the working group. On the website in the agenda is a link to the City Council agenda where we had discussed this and voted on the formation of this group. So you can look at that. But it says introductions. I did just kind of introduce everybody, but do people want to go around and say anything more? Okay, no, I'm getting shaking heads no, so we can simply move on. I think we all know who each other is. So the purpose, as I understand it, as we voted on, was to have a few meetings with a working group to establish what the next step would be, what the next group would be, or task force, or next working group, or framework, if you will. And so I'm on agenda item number 2 now, still. Does anyone have a comment about that, or want to expand on that at all, or any comments at all about the purpose of this group? And feel free to raise your hand like this, or to use your blue hand in Zoom, either way, or just speak out if no one else is speaking. But I'm not seeing anyone on that item. So again, the link to the agenda and link also to the meeting video is on the website, and people can take a look at that. The minutes have not been published to that meeting since they're typically put together and published in advance of the next formal council meeting. Okay, if there's no other comments, then I'm going to move on to item number 3, which is good of the city. This is for people to speak on items that are not on this agenda. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? I do see one hand raised. So City Clerk, could you call that person in?
Go ahead. Hi, it's not David Danby, it's Julie Winkelstein. I I don't know if this counts as being on the agenda or not, because I'm not really sure how it fits in, but I'm really concerned, as usual, about the way that you disseminate information, that information is disseminated about city meetings like this. I didn't see any flyers up. I got something because I checked the website. I would really like attention to be paid to that. And I just, again, want to draw attention to the fact that I think that there's a lot more interactive ways that we could draw in the community so they know about meetings like this. The police chief, the police force could hand out flyers, the city SEJC could hand out flyers, city council members could hand out flyers, they could be posted on Solano, they could be posted under the BART tracks, all the ways that we have done in the past when we try to get people involved that I don't see the city doing, and could start us, a community volunteer group to help get out information. But whatever it is, I'm really concerned about the number of people who would like to be here who don't know anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Can anyone from the staff verify whether or not this went out on e-notification? I'm seeing a nodded head.
Mayor, as well as we actually posted it at the kiosk on Solano Avenue. So that was in addition to our regular posting places. It was also in the e-news this past Friday. You'll see a new summary section that's basically going to stay in the e-news throughout the conversations we have on these shared topics.
Okay, thank you. And another factual item is that I encourage everyone to sign up for e-notification on the city's website. If you go to the city's website, it is one of the items near the top of the website. You can click on that link and sign up for all sorts of notifications from the city. And we'll move on to the next public comment. City Clerk, please.
Go ahead, Linda.
Linda, I think you're still muted.
Okay, hello, my name is Linda. I wanted to introduce myself. This is the first time to this meeting. And I am a longtime citizen resident of Albany. I've never gotten involved before. So I would like to participate. And so I just wanted to introduce myself.
Thank you very much. Anyone else for public comment? Again, this is for items that are not on the agenda. And I'm not seeing any more hands raised. So thank you for your comments. We'll move on to item number 3 on the, excuse me. I see the agenda is might have a little bit of a numbering problem. There seems to be 2 item 3s. I'll move on to the second item 3, which is the develop the draft framework for the task force for the city council review. I think this is where we'll spend all of our time, or the bulk of our time, balance of our time. And so we'll start out, we don't have any staff reports under these items because I think this is a brand new thing and we're here to define it. So item number A, or item A under charge, excuse me, item A under this item is the charge of what I think would be the next group that we are going to propose to form. So do I have comments from the participants? Vice Mayor, panelists.
Thank you. I would like to suggest before we start that we make it clear what our process will be. And I would like to suggest that we sort of follow the format of a city council meeting where this subcommittee has an opportunity to talk among ourselves for a little bit. Then it opens up to public comment and then comes back to us for a final discussion before moving to the next item, just to make it clear to us and to the public what we're actually doing.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I agree, and I think there's no dissent for that. We will move on in that way. So now is the time for this body to discuss item A, which is the charge of whatever will be the next thing. So that's kind of an open-ended question. Does anyone have any thoughts about what the charge should be of another body that we will suggest to form going forward? Go ahead, Chair Downs.
Thanks so much. Appreciate all of y'all here. I just wanted to note a few things that we could include as we think about our discussion. Some of which there are a couple of organizations that are nationwide that examine these issues. The one that I think is, to my knowledge, is the best connected across the country is called the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. But then there's also some interesting information that has some of the same principles and some other different ones, called the Justice Collaborative Institute, which did a recent report, very recent report on principles of effective police commissions and oversight. While they differ in different ways, and they lay out all kinds of things that might well, some of the details of which might well fit with a bigger department and a bigger city or town than ours, they lay out a handful of principles that I think are interesting to think about. The first of which is, what is the reporting of whatever body we create? Who do they report to? Both of their recommendations are that their reports essentially are to the public. In this case, that could be the city council or however. How are they constituted? And ways of trying to constitute them through community input, which could be as other commissions through city council or other forums. We could imagine all kinds of different ways. And then the third principle that they have is what do they, that they have a clear task of what they're supposed to do. And this can range in large departments from relatively large areas of control, or in very large departments, including of investigation and so on, to in smaller departments to more more narrowly defined tasks. But I think that especially the first two legs of that stool that they establish, who do they report to, how are they constituted, I think would be important things for us to figure out.
That's a great comment. Thank you. And I just want to pause, interrupt for a second and ask staff, are we, and we don't necessarily have to, but are we able to take detailed notes of this meeting and publish them? Because the chair just mentioned a couple of organizations, and I'd like to follow up after this and do my research. So either I can take notes about that, or we can, what does staff think about the ability to produce notes on this meeting?
In terms of minutes, because it's a Brown Act body, you will have action minutes. I don't know if they'll go into the level of detail that you may need. But it is being recorded as well, so we could go back and reference anything that may come up that you'll need after the fact. Okay.
I think what would be great is if we could produce these action minutes as soon as possible afterwards, and maybe share them among these participants who could then add the details that they had referenced, like those organization names, so that we could make sure that all that information gets out to the public, and we can talk more about that later. Sure. But I think that for this body, it would be great to get in the city council meetings. We normally there's a lag in publishing the minutes, but I think the public would appreciate if we could get these out, not immediately, but as soon as possible. So, thank you. Okay, stepping back up to other comments from, Vice Mayor, please.
Thank you. I think that I have a little different opinion from Chair Downs. He seems to have jumped ahead to the fact that we're setting up a police oversight committee. I think our task, as we stated earlier, is simply to set up the framework for a task force to, I think, educate ourselves and work with the police department on policies and issues and history, and have that be the body that comes back to council with an analysis of what the next step is. I'm not sure why we're jumping to the conclusion of a committee that hasn't been established yet. So I'll stop right there for now.
Yeah, I think we can be brainstorming at this point, and everything's on the table. But I hear both of you, so let's continue the discussion.
I'll jump in and contribute if it's okay. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I think my thoughts were, I love that you started off with, Mayor, about just kind of the charge. I think being really clear about what the charge is. And I think what Chair Downs mentioned is probably going to be part of that research is what I'm thinking. So I think there's a lot of research this group would have to do to really identify what are the key challenges to even prioritize the work. And oversight and obviously there's a lot of different things that can come out of that research around, community policing. There's so many different, data collection. There's a lot of things to consider. So I think just really clarifying the charge for the group and including that group can really be helpful with research and also identifying some key challenges to prioritize the work. And then also maybe identify some key action steps that may be recommended to the city to consider in its work in terms of oversight. So I think also clarifying obviously the roles of this group as well, but I think they all kind of fall into that area of what the charge will be of this group. So just really clarifying that. And then of course, the other piece was I figure will probably be part of this conversation is the process for actually recruiting people to be a part of this work group as well. So I think those are going to be some key things that we can talk about and I'll kind of save that for later. So I just want to contribute that as well to the notes and thoughts.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to chime in? Well, let me just reflect back some of the things that I've heard to make sure that I'm hearing people correctly. I see what I hear from the Vice Mayor is that we're not, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, we're not necessarily ready to make a recommendation to form a permanent body, but you think we need to form a body that's going to do the research into whatever a permanent body, if there is one, is going to be. Did I get that right? That's kind of convoluted.
Yeah, we're not, our charge is not to set up any type of permanent body. Our type is to set up a task force to examine police community relations policies, like at least that's my understanding. I think that Nicole Anderson had it absolutely right, that there's a lot of research to be done. Who's that cute person? There's, at least, I think I've seen a report where there's at least 9 different types of oversight commissions, some of which come fully staffed, which of course costs a whole lot of money. Some are more community-based, but we don't know what we need. I think that's the real key here. Is I think a lot of what the task force is going to do is to educate the community about the police department and to give the community an opportunity to share their thoughts with the police department as to what they feel their needs or and perceptions are. So until we go through that sort of education piece, I don't know how we can jump to a conclusion.
Okay, yes, Vice Chair Gary.
Oh, sorry, let me close my window so you won't hear Bart. So I guess the first thing we probably need to do is establish the mission, the goals, right? What is that? Put that on paper, and then the next 3 steps. What will follow after that, right? So what are the 3? Let's just do 3. What are 3 important things as far as this research we need to pull together? On the risk side, how many excessive force cases has the city had in the past? And this is just an example. You can go to your JPA, they can pull far as back as 10 years. And then that'll start saying, you know, giving us some type of information. And again, this is an example. But I think if we start there with our plan, right? What is our mission? What is our goal? And then just putting things in place so we can end to where, you know, Chair Downs had provided, you know, the resources and research we can, you know, formulate this committee or whatever we want to call it at that time.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts? Well, I might want to just say, I think the goals, making sure we understand what we want of the goals of the next body is the right next thing. And are we all okay with the vice mayor's what vice mayor is stating, that this next thing is the body, this next body, we're going to make a recommendation to form this next body, and this next body is not a permanent body, but is the body to do the research into what would be the step after that. Are we all okay with that, or are we needing to talk more about that particular aspect? Go ahead, Chair Downs.
I appreciate it. The only piece I would add is my recollection, and we could look back at it, is that in the council meeting that there was a motion that was formulated explicitly to form a advisory task, advisory body that would report to the chief, and that did not carry. And at least one of the council members said it was because the question hadn't been resolved of what it would take. So, I mean, I guess I'm open. What I don't want to do is create a scenario in which we sort of create tunnels that we have to keep going down to ever be able to address this issue. And so I think it is an issue, you know, a council is going to act as council acts, and that's right and just. But I think we should be careful about not setting up a process that's designed to delay that to a point where it, you know, would undermine the sort of idea that it's going to be taken seriously in it.
Yeah, that's fair. I understand that. I understand your concern there. So it sounds like then there is consensus. Oh, go ahead, Nicole. Did you have your hand raised?
Yeah. Just a quick thought, because Chair Downs said something that I wanted to also bring context, is that, you know, we've had the pleasure of beginning to work with the subcommittees from SEJC. And because one of the subcommittees is around policing, I think that really kind of, you know, utilizing the work that's been done on the subcommittee will help inform this work. But again, I think that word I use about research, and we have a lot of information we don't know. There's a lot of data we don't have. And so I think, you know, to jump to what that group even looks like would also require the ability to open up the conversation about who's on this kind of working group, because I think that will also possibly shift, you know, how the work goes, because we don't have all the perspectives on even this call, right? And so I think that there's a lot of unknown still. But again, going with what is the charge, what is the vision of city leadership to ensure that there is some process that, as Chair Downs mentioned, that's going to stay solidified in the process and stay focused, even when we have lots of different changes that may happen along the way, that this group's role is really solidified in terms of what is its role. And obviously things will come out of it that we don't know. So I think that non-closure has to be accepted, that there's a lot of unknowns, and because of the structure of the city, right? Being a small city, having limited resources, there are some things that may be able to happen and other things that may not. So I just want to just kind of share those, you know, few thoughts, and just, again, appreciate that some of this work and capacity is also being done through SEJC, but obviously that still doesn't include the entire community. And there's a whole lot of people who haven't been able to weigh in on this yet. So I just didn't want you all either to kind of go into a box of what you can and can't do, because I think there's a lot of resources and value to folks in the community who be a part of that working group, and allowing that working group to contribute to this conversation, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you for that. So if we're agreed on the what this next body that we'll be recommending, pretty much agreed on what it is, let's talk about the mission, the goals, the charter, or the charge, as in the minutes. What I heard so far was data gathering, and I see your hand, Vice Mayor. What I heard so far is data gathering and research into what other jurisdictions do. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Since Nicole Anderson brought up the SEJC committee, I kind of wanted to clarify in my own mind what is the scope of that committee and how does it differ from a task force? In my mind, the last thing we want to do is have two committees going down either parallel paths or opposing paths and using a lot of people's time and duplicating effort. And maybe if I just understood what that committee is going to do, I could understand it better.
I mean,
Well,
I don't want to speak for Chair Downs. Oh, go ahead, Mayor.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to speak for Chair Downs or Vice Chair Gary, but I want, from a consultant perspective, remember our role was to support SEJC in developing a plan that they could recommend to the city. And so in that plan are a variety of topics. So there's other subcommittees, there's housing, there's business development, there's education. So policing is one of many subcommittees. And so that's part of that larger social justice, racial equity impact plan work. So that is really informing the work of SEJC to really provide that. So I think there are two things going at the same time. And I think that there's not necessarily one to replace the other. I think there's two different functions here. But obviously their big picture is around racial equity, which has multiple layers to it. So I think that work will really inform it. But I think what we're talking about today is kind of a separate piece, which I believe the city really is holding, right? Because that is our responsibility. That's not necessarily of the commission, but more of the city. So I appreciate that, Vice Mayor, for asking that clarity, because I definitely don't want it to be confusion. But as consultants, we kind of see two parallels happening, which are necessary because there's a lot to unpack with all of this. So I hope that helped a little bit as far as your question in terms of at least how I see it as a consultant. And I don't know if the commissioners chair and vice chair have different thoughts around that. But
all right, may I ask?
I just want to confirm that the Vice Chair Downs and Vice Chair Gary, you are the police subcommittee, correct?
Actually not. We were the two, we did separate allocations. And so the two people on the policing subcommittee for the equity action plan are myself and Commissioner Kerr.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay, Vice Mayor, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was kind of curious as to what, and Nicole, maybe you can answer this, how much interaction with staff that subcommittee would have. I'm always really sensitive to the use of staff time.
Yeah, we actually have that as kind of an agenda item with all of the subcommittees to really meet with them and really prioritize the work and recognize that the staff will play a role in this. Each staff member, to my knowledge, has some sense of the idea of what's going on, but I think there's still some initial meetings that will happen with staff to say, hey, what is the bandwidth around what data is available, what research, what do we need to kind of outsource in other spaces that the staff doesn't have. So I definitely have that as something that, we've talked about, that the role of the staff will be integral in this, but also it's limited and we don't want to, I use the word prioritize the work for a reason, because we don't want to overwhelm the staff with things that cannot be, feasibly done considering you have a small department. And that is something we have to consider with this type of work. So it is part of the conversation around what that looks like. And so we're still in the very preliminary stages of this. We're still just at a place of identifying what are the equity challenges, right? What are those things we still need to research? What is the data we don't have? And so there's still a lot of work to be done. And so the staff hasn't even been asked to be a part of that kind of research yet, because we're still identifying what do we want to focus on? What are those goals, as Vice Chair Gary mentioned about even this group. So we're still in the preliminary phases of that. So I hope that helps. Chair Downs, did I miss anything on that piece around our conversation about staffing?
Not directly. We
Okay.
you know, I'm glad to talk, but I also know, Mayor, I think you've been waiting to speak, so I can wait until after you speak.
Well, no, I definitely want to hear your point of view. Please go ahead and I can follow if you have something to say at this point.
So I think, you know, when council charged SEJC to do the equity action plan, of course, SEJC, you know, is eager to take on that work and to work with Ms. Anderson and Dr. Holt on that, and have been doing that. One of the frameworks of the equity action plan, you know, that they helped us to develop was the idea that it's looking with a relatively longer horizon, and that we're articulating the goals and priorities for the city for, say, a 10-year horizon. Where do we want to be? How do we measure how we're doing at getting there? What Commissioner Kerr, you know, had a number of suggestions about, you know, both what should be there, you know, we're early in the process, but what should be some of the ways that we could ascertain that goals? How do we get information through survey mechanisms that both Dr. Holt and Ms. Anderson are working on developing? And how would we develop recommendations for council for how to measure how we're doing getting there? And that can include a wide range of things that speak to policing. You know, on that particular, on the Equity Action Plan subcommittees, our time frame is that we're working toward, in an ideal world, we'd be working toward, as the contract with the consultant specified, something like, you know, a year time frame, knowing that all of us our terms expire on December 31st. I think, you know, we're trying to get as much of it on paper and done, you know, within this, you know, this calendar year, so that even if there remain work to be done for the next incarnation of the SEJC, that things don't fall by the wayside. So that's been the primary focus of that particular subcommittee. As you know, though they've just been formulated, I think, you know, in terms of, you know, the only thing I would, you know, again restate is, if we don't want to have a scenario where we keep sort of drawing dead ends and then saying that nothing can be discussed. If we do that, I think people lose faith in the process. If they lose faith in the process, they call for more radical responses. So I think it's really short-sighted. And there has to be some forum at which people can speak about their questions about oversight, and there has to be some way in which they can at least ask to be heard. Obviously, if the council decides on a different plan, that's completely within council's right. But I'd be cautious about trying to set up definitions that are aimed to make sure that nobody can do that. In the end, what I think that'll do is lead to an extreme reaction that leads to a much more you know, probably radical plan than any of us would propose right now. So I think it's counterproductive. So I think that we do need to be cautious about not seeming to construct dead ends.
Yeah, I just
Anybody's doing that, Greg.
sorry, Vice Mayor, could you state that again?
I don't think anybody's doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I think what I hear is that there is a fear that might be at least the perception. I think I personally am not bothered by the two forks in this road. And I think that if we have people on the SCJC who are interested in this issue and are not taking an undue amount of staff time, that they ought to contribute in that way as well. And we can talk about how they might contribute to the body that we recommend as well. And I'll just brainstorming, throw a couple of ideas out there. That subcommittee could present to the next body that we will, that, you know, hopefully will come out of this, or that subcommittee could be a part of that body as well. So those are just two ideas. But I don't think, and I think also that people will be coming to SCJC meetings and will want to talk about racism in the police force, or racism in policing, and I don't think we can tell them not to, and therefore the SCJC is going to at least have to do some work to receive that input, and at the very least. So I think, as I think maybe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Vice Mayor, but maybe your concern is that there might be two bodies coming to different conclusions, or two bodies who or a body, the subcommittee that that is not understanding that this body and the body that follows this has a certain charge. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's an understanding that we have formed this body with a specific purpose. But again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Vice Mayor.
Why don't we move forward and figure out what the purpose is?
Sure. Yeah. All right. So sounds good. So I wrote down a couple of things: data gathering, research on what other jurisdictions do, what other, and I thank you, Vice Chair Gary, for suggesting that we get right into that part. So, what other mission, goals, charge should this next body have? And go ahead, Dr. Holt.
A couple of things to consider with this next committee. I'm going to move you in front of me. I've been watching you guys on this screen. I don't know why. It's just been easier. A couple of things to consider that I've been kind of jotting down as I've been listening to all of this. And as most of you probably figured out, I'm more of a listener. I like to be on the back side and listen and jot down a lot of notes about what I'm seeing. And what I see this next group being able to do is a few things in the purpose of them coming together around the goals, the gathering, the data gathering, the research. Something that this group could do, especially if there are actual council members on this, is set the parameters for how this work needs to move forward or how they would like it to move forward. For example, if there are some things that folks are absolutely not interested in doing, do not have this committee waste their time. Just come out and say that, we want to place parameters. Otherwise, give them the freedom to move forward without parameters, one way or the other. I think that is something the committee's going to need, because kind of watching on the back end with SEJC and the subcommittees and watching the city council and hearing the public comment, this body could really use some or provide some direction around communication. It doesn't seem like there are clear channels of communication between this body, the council, the community, the SEJC, kind of who's on first, what's on second. And so perhaps this committee could, because it's strictly about policing, and that seems to be the biggest hot button issue, perhaps one of their tasks could be, let's set up some lines of communication internally and externally, so that when we start getting into some of the areas of staffing and things like that, we know where we can put that, because from the global perspective of what we're trying to do, the staffing piece is going to be in response to whatever it is that the task force is asked to do, or whatever parameters they're provided. The other thing is to look at process. And how is that process going to be communicated? So just something to think about with the goals, the parameters, the process, and communication. If we can set up some clear streamline of communication between internal and external communication, you might find that there's ways that you can find out what's happening in SEJC, what's happening in their subcommittees, what's happening in the task force, and bring it all together.
Okay, thank you for that.
If I can contribute one additional thought, just I'm going back to Vice Mayor's question, and I know we've discussed it, but something to give context to as well in terms of even the timeline. So there's kind of this short-term, medium, long-term kind of process all kind of happening in terms of planning that. And I do want to remind us about what Chair Downs mentioned about, there's a time frame for the current folks on the commission, but also there's a time frame for making these recommendations to City Council from SEJC. So if you just kind of, go back like 6-7 months, the conversation may look very different, right? Policing may have not been something that was, a hot topic, as Dr. Shelley Holt mentioned. So I think understanding that, 5 years from now, SEJC's role is still the same. It's still to really research and unpack those social justice and equity issues. And there could be something very different we're talking about. So I think, looking at that as the short-term work of even the subcommittee work is really to impact that action plan, which is more of we're going to do that this year. But then the long-term work, the 10-year plan really is about, unpacking those issues that you're not only the police, task force, but there may be other task force that come to fruition because of some of the challenges that you're going to identify through your research. And so I think what you'll find, as Dr. Shelley said, communication is a big one for a lot of organizations, right? And I don't even know if it's just necessarily the communication of the different bodies internally, but it's also the external communication and making sure the public is aware of some of the issues so that their concerns no longer are concerns. It's just more about, oh, we have an understanding, we have awareness, and so therefore we're not as alarmed. And so it kind of helps that perception versus reality struggle is just having clear communication. To push us along, because I know there's not a lot of time to unpack all the details, but I suspect just from, kind of prior work with groups that some of the things that may bubble up in that kind of mission conversation and the goals is maybe around how do we move towards community policing? How do we really look at, addressing those kind of non-emergency issues? How do we work better with our community partners? How do we ensure the community is well informed so they understand when to call the police, when not to call the police? I think all of those things will fall under that kind of community policing where the community works together and there's a real clear understanding. The presence of the police in the community is an understood norm, and that people have an opportunity to discuss that. But I think also the data collection is going to be a big part of this because many cities struggle with having the data collection, even the process to say, what is the problem, right? So the problem right now, if we put out surveys right now, for example, it's going to be a lot of perception, right? It's not going to always be a reality, and there'll be some, but it'll be a reality based on different perceptions. So I think your working group is going to be helpful, but what you'll find is just data collection processes is going to be something that will bubble up. Is how do we even know what we don't know? And I think that's the piece that's going to be the struggle moving forward is how do you create that as goals when there's so much information we still don't know? So I want to say that because I think you have multiple things going at the same time. You have your short-term work right now, which SCJC can weigh in on with that subcommittee, but you're going to have your medium and your long-term goals, which are all going to really be a part of this process. So I hope that helps contribute a little bit about just kind of how you move forward and be okay with some of the non-closure that even developing a mission, developing goals should be done with the community. So I think it might be helpful to say, let's talk about what this working group's purpose is. And that group would actually help create that mission and goal. But also that group will be made up of these particular stakeholders who need to be part of this conversation so that we can be better informed based on moving forward. Now, so I hope that helps a little bit as far as trying to move the group along.
Yes, Vice Chair Gary.
I had a question. Is there a police presence in the schools? I know they're distant learning, but I don't know if there is, before I go any further. No? Yes?
We don't have school resource officers. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vice Mayor, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Sorry. Listening to what Nicole said makes me kind of think about maybe looking at this in a whole different way. And maybe we're kind of jumping ahead with this task force. This whole process started as looking at issue of race throughout the entire city, the entire community, not the police department, not the school district, just straight across the board. I'm wondering if we should be working on that piece and let the task force not have a task force right now. Let SCJC do their work and focus on the whole community and see what comes out of that. Nicole, would that make more sense? Are we kind of going backwards here a little bit here, or sideways, or?
No, I hear your question, and it makes sense what you're asking. I think what a lot of this response is to what the community is asking for. So I think we don't want to lose sight of it. It's not about necessarily, let me back up. It should be something that's kind of a core belief for everyone on the call, right? Is we want to do the right thing. We want to ensure that these experiences based on racial, institutionalized racism is addressed. So I think the policing is something that became that hot topic. And I think it would be, ideal to allow a space. I look at the task force as a space for your community representatives to all come together and have a similar conversation. I think right now that's not happening. And so what we're finding is public comments, right? The community listening session. Those are the spaces that people find where I can share my voice. So I feel like the task force is that space where you can actually allow those diverse perspectives to come together and actually inform the work. And so when I think about system change, right, part of that work is empowering those voices that haven't been at the table. So I see that task force as representing that. So I definitely wouldn't recommend going backwards, as you mentioned, but know that the SCJC's role is beyond the policing. So I want to make sure that is something that, just reminding you all of kind of the charge for SCJC. They are not overseeing anything about police. They're just contributing to that. And Chair Downs is obviously the representative for that subcommittee, but come December, it may be someone else, right? To be able to continue that conversation and give perspective from SCJC. So I still think you probably want to keep that ball rolling, but you want to have a diverse perspective, because I think there's a lot we don't know yet. And I'm excited to learn that. I think as even a consultant, there's a lot of perspectives that are not on this call to be able to really help unpack and do the research together and really help inform the work. So I don't think it's a bad idea to have a task force. I think you want to be really careful about, okay, we got to make sure we have diverse representation and really get the diverse perspective of the entire city, knowing there's a limited amount of space for people. You can't have everybody on it, but there definitely has to be a way for the community to engage in this work, even if they're not on the task force. And I think that's what the community is asking for, but also recognizing there is a role for staff, there's a role for everyone. And I think that's the other part of this, is to identify what is the role, so that it's very clear. And in that communication, people see the work happening, they recognize it's happening. It may not go as fast as people would like, but they see the progress that's happening. And I think you're on that way. I'm really excited about it for you as a city.
Thank you. So one of the things that occurs to me as we talk about this is we do, I think, want to bring back for the next meeting notes or outline of what we think we've decided on so far to start with at the next meeting. And if people agree with that, I'm a little bit, I'm not sure whose charge it would be to do that, whether it be the consultants or myself and the vice mayor or other staff. Do people have any thoughts about that, or shall we? I am taking my own notes, and we could take that discussion offline. But making sure that we bring something back to the next meeting is an outline of where we've come so far, I think, is important. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Or I can just take that offline as well and just try to come back myself with something for the next meeting.
I can speak to that. I don't want to speak out of turn, but that's part of what I'm doing in the background, is taking all of those notes. So if it would help,
okay.
Do something like that and kind of run it through, because we have notes from every single meeting, including this one. I'm taking kind of
wonderful
notes of everything, so we can help with that.
Okay.
And work with staff if we need be.
Okay. Wonderful. That sounds great. And then I'll just send you my notes too, just in case that would be helpful. But that would be wonderful if we could depend on you for that. Thank you very much. Great. Wonderful. Then I don't have to keep checking my notes to make sure I got everything down. Would this be a good time to take public comment, or do people want to say a few more things first? Sounds like public comment might be the order of the day now. So we have at least one hand raised, now two. So please go ahead and raise those hands, members of the public, if you'd like to speak, and the city clerk will bring you in order. City clerk.
Hi, this is Judy Kerr, and I want to thank everybody for your time and your work and your commitment to the issues at hand. I've been listening to the conversation, and there's a couple thoughts that go through my mind about where this conversation seems to be moving and where it seems to be stuck. The two words, one is incremental progress, which sort of is a way to feel good and not do much. Another one is obfuscation, which is even worse than incremental progress. And the conflict that I'm hearing between the voices that are on the screen in front of me is not so much are we going to continue this work, and is there going to be a continuation of this body or a new body to work on it, but what the task is going to be. And I speak to you and will always be speaking to you as a crime victim. So I really want to trust the police department in any city that I'm in at any point in time, because I have gone through that trauma in my life. But at this point in time, I think we need to resolve the question about whether we're talking about an advisory body or we're talking about an oversight body. And I think that's the elephant that we're not talking about right now. So I'd like to invite you to actually have that conversation about whether you think we need an oversight body. Chair Downs mentioned a group, Nicole, I think it's called. One of the board members of Nicole is actually on the Police Oversight Commission in City of Oakland, which is not without its problems. So I think that it's fair enough to have this conversation, and I think the public is wanting you to do that work. I certainly do. So I invite you to have that talk. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, this is Corey Dosty. So I wanted to encourage folks to look at the task force to reimagine public safety that Oakland has put together. It has some concrete stuff to it, and is about like a short-term, intensive, pulling together community voices, doing research, and then establishing how do we move forward. I know that Oakland is different in terms of size and in terms of existing things, such as there already being an oversight committee. But I think that there is a lot of inspiration to be taken there. And I do think a lot of these orgs would be willing, if invited, to collaborate with us, especially like community-based service orgs, including in Berkeley, right? I think that we're doing this sort of isolationist thing that is not great in terms of thinking about alternatives that we can come up with, and thinking about input that we can get. And I know that we want community input from Albany, and maybe that's the first step. But just in terms of looking forward, I think this is a useful framework. And then, yeah, I really, the idea of backing out of creating a body that has any kind of community input is, it sounds bad. That sounds like backpedaling, and that sounds really frustrating. And I think saying that policing wasn't the initial thing, that it was initially about race, when it wasn't the initial thing about the murder of George Floyd by a police officer with 3 police officers standing by, I don't think you can separate those. And I think that's been said repeatedly at these meetings. So I really urge, yes, I think that the consultants, both of them, are absolutely right about needing to figure out communication, especially with the community, and that Chair Downs is absolutely right about this really risking seeming like going down multiple tunnels that are dead ends and nothing getting done. So, you know, this meeting was a motion to establish a body, and to back out of that is, I don't understand why that would even be on the table. It's kind of really frustrating and kind of scary, and makes me doubt the commitment to really looking at this, even though I understand it may feel like an administrative concern and all of that. So yeah, that's one perspective. And thank you for continuing to do the work, and please do continue to do the work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hi, this is Bart Grossman. I've been listening to the process of the meeting, and it seems to me that the problem you're having is you can't seem to decide on what your purpose is. It's very hard to develop a process without knowing what the purpose is. Initially, the purpose was to talk about an advisory committee for the police chief. but council did not want to prejudge. That suggests that the purpose of this committee was to create a body that would develop a model for citizen input, whether that be an oversight committee, whether that be a citizens review committee, whether that be an advisory committee, whatever it is. It seems like that was the purpose. If that's not the purpose, I have no idea what the purpose is, because other issues in policing are being discussed by SEJC, and we'll come back to you for action at a later point. So if you embrace the mission of designing a way of improving citizen input, then I think we will know what it is that you're doing. And if you can't embrace that, it seems to me that there's perhaps a conflict here that nobody wants to talk about. But if you don't, you're going to be stuck for quite a while, I'm afraid. And nobody really is going to understand what this group is supposed to do. So I just say that respectfully and lovingly. I know you all care and you're all trying to do well, but it just seems to me that you've got to get clear about what it is you're trying to accomplish. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Go ahead, Julie.
Hi, thanks. This is Julie Winkelstein. I'm really glad to have gone after Corey and Bart, because I agree wholeheartedly with both of them. Corey's concern about the lack of community input is one that I have a lot of concern about. And so I know that Shelley talked about, Nicole Anderson talked about hearing from the community. And so I'm wondering what she's thinking in terms of how exactly that's going to happen. And if that's really, I also am very confused about the point of your this subcommittee or whatever it is, what exactly it is you are trying to accomplish. But if Bart Grossman is correct, and the purpose is to design a way of improving community input, I think, or citizen input, as he said, I think that would be wonderful. But I'd like to know that that's really going to happen. That's my biggest concern. I also, I think that Nicole Anderson also mentioned somebody mentioned that the consultants were creating a survey, and I hope that's not true. I don't know if that's really, are you the two that are going to create the survey and there'll be no input into it? Or there's probably more information about that, but that scares me to think that there'll be a survey of the community without input from the community in terms of creating the survey and an opportunity for people to talk about their concerns, so you know what to ask and how to ask it and how to reach people. And I, again, just want to emphasize the lack of communication that is happening. The metaphor I came up with is if I were giving out $1 million, and the way I did it was by posting a note on my front door, and you had to know to come to my front door to get the information. That's what it's like from the city. Like when the mayor says and encourages everybody to sign up for these online notifications, all of the people, we have so many people in this community who don't even know this is happening right now. So I really hope that I would love to see this committee create another committee, this committee disband after creating a committee that is looking for citizen input and really wants to hear that citizen input and is figuring out how to get it. So I think it would be great, as Bart said, if you could figure out why you're doing this, what you're here for. Thank you.
Thank you. Last chance for public input. I'm not seeing any more hands. Oh, there is one more hand.
My name is Linda. I am new to this process, and so I just wanted to ask a very ignorant question, which is, what does SEJC stand for? That's all. Thank you.
Okay. The easiest task for me of the night. That stands for Social and Economic Justice Commission, or committee, I believe, which is one of the advisory bodies to the City Council. Okay, thanks everyone for their comments. Let's bring it back here. So I just want to be clear about something. I think there was a suggestion that we could possibly not move forward with another body, but I thought we arrived at that was just an idea that's being floated around, but that there still is the consensus that this body will create an advisory body or a task force. So I'm seeing a nod from the vice mayor on that. I don't think it was an idea, and again, I think I would caution people not to, to understand that this body is a brand new body, and our charge is brand new, and we're coming up with a charge for another body. So I think there's still a lot of things to talk out. So be patient with us as we talk them out and arrive to our final conclusion and our final analysis, and hopefully you'll be happy with that. So I just want to reiterate and I wanted to I wanted to say that, and then say that, see if anyone wanted to comment on that, and also a public comment about the survey creation. So any comments about either of those things?
Is it okay if I speak up?
Go ahead, Dr. Holt.
First of all, please know that we would never, I can definitely speak for our companies, that we would never create anything without the input of the people. And so we want to get to a point where we can hear from everyone in the Albany community. And there are definitely some challenges that we're identifying and we're seeing moving forward. And I think it's, and I got to commend this group and the community, because this is hard work. This is very hard work, and it's going to be hard for some time. So when we first talked about this, if you could recall, when we and everybody was on that one of the meetings where Nicole talked about experiencing discomfort and knowing that you're going to end with some non-closure. And so I just want to have a process check for a moment for everybody that this is tough. And what we're seeing here, you guys are doing great, but this is tough work. It's tough from the community's end to hear it and see it. It's tough on the staff end because you know you got 700 things going on, and this can sometimes feel like one more thing, but also the thing. You have emotions running high in the community. We have a lot of things going on. And so please know that this process is very slow. It's much slower than anything you've ever done. I guarantee you that. I've bought, millions of dollars of buses as a school district, and it took less time than what, spending millions of dollars takes a lot less time than what it's going to take for us to move this through. And so I just want everybody to just pause for a moment and realize that this is tough work. And even the formation of the committee becomes controversial because there's so much going on. But I want to just say that we would never create a survey without everyone. The process that SEJC is going through is to figure out how to get involvement of the community. So what we met about for 2 hours last night was literally just saying, how are we going to design this? How are we going to get folks involved? How are we going to get the messages out? Because all of that has to be thought through. And what folks got to realize is that literally you're looking at all the workers right here. There's not some great big huge staff of people, that are all behind computers doing a bunch of work. It is literally us right here trying to put things together. And when we invite the community in, we don't want to waste people's time. It's going to be quick. We got to be pointed and be able to move forward, because the chances of being able to get folks on, especially in these times when we get them, we have to really utilize and ask all the questions that we can in that moment to be able to move forward, and then create more community forums and such where you can do this over time and continue that information gathering. So please just be patient with the process. And, we do this all over the country, and it's a very slow process, but you're doing fine. But just be patient with it and continue to move forward with that. And so I just want to comment on, especially on the survey, we would never do that without community involvement, but figuring out how. And I also want to invite anybody from the community that wants to reach out to Nicole or myself via email or the website or whatever to get information in, or you have some way to get people involved, please do. This is a working committee and a working group. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I see Chair Downs' hand up.
Just wanted briefly to confirm what Dr. Holt said, that the discussion of our subcommittee included how and what we would survey on. And my belief is that these will be agenda items in our future SEJC meetings. And so at least in that pathway that it will be discussed in public.
Thank you. Vice Chair Gary.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the community for speaking out, providing information for us so we can move forward. The community gave us suggestions on what this task force is supposed to look like, or at least what we thought it was supposed to be. How do we get the citizens involved, and what magnitude of involvement will they have in this process? So if that's our purpose, then let's start establishing the next steps. I don't know if everybody agree with that, but listening to the community, we have to remember what brought us here, what happened in our nation, right? Okay, we've identified that. Now let's start moving forward on how we can get the community involved in some kind of manner, right? Communication, of course. And then let's just start with the steps on what that's going to take to get them involved. And again, we will have that oversight we need, right? If we just structure it as such. So the community is involved, we're happy, and we're moving forward. I just think that, we have the purpose. Let's keep moving forward and stay focused. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I'll defer to Nicole. Were you going to say something?
I just was going to piggyback on Vice Chair's Gary's comment, is just to repeat, because I think we've already discussed this as a group. So I just want to see if we can just repeat what is the purpose, so that's very clear, and just have some key bullet points of what is the charge. And then I think move that into, that will evolve once that working group comes together, that task force, which is the purpose of a task force, is to unpack and research and identify challenges, make recommendations. So I think Mayor Pilch, you had kind of you mentioned this earlier. Can you just maybe repeat what was kind of the overarching kind of purpose and charge for this this group? And I think that will help us with moving into maybe the process.
I'll take a stab at it. I like to put things down into bullet points, and this is what I have so far. The charge will be data gathering, research into what other jurisdictions do. And I do want to say that the comment from the public about the body in Oakland is a very good one, although our city certainly is unique. Other people are doing this work too, and we can benefit from learning from them as well. So reaching out to others would be important. So data gathering, data collection, research on what other jurisdictions are doing. Defining the communication is another thing I heard. SEJC, Council, Task Force, how does that work? Defining a process, talking about short, middle, long term, and improving making sure citizen input is front and center. Those are some of the bullet points I heard, so please fill in what I missed there. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. Let's see if we can get this down to 3 bullet points. And I think, communication and involving the citizens and all of that almost comes under the members and publicizing the task force and that piece of it. So I don't think that, I almost think it's a given. I don't know that it has to be spelled out. Julie, I hear you, and I know that you have real concerns about our communication. But let me just get through this part. I sort of look at it this way. The task force is established to encourage open communication between the citizens or the community and the police department, to increase community understanding of police policies and procedures, including data gathering, increase police department understanding of community needs and perceptions. And I kind of think that's a pretty broad umbrella for the task force to work under.
Would you mind repeating that one more time, maybe a little bit slowly, so I can write it down?
And in no particular order. Encourage open communication between the police department and the community. Okay. Increase community understanding of police policies and procedures, including data gathering. Increase police department understanding of community needs and perceptions.
Sorry, could you say that last one more time?
Increase police department understanding of community needs and perceptions.
Okay, thank you for that straw person proposal. What do people think about that?
You call me a straw person?
I don't want to say straw man, so I need a better phrase, I guess.
I think what does the Wizard of Oz think about being a straw person? You don't have a brain or a heart or something? How rude.
Go ahead, Chair Downs.
I wonder, thank you, Vice Mayor, for that suggestion. I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if you would repeat your bullet points again, just so that we can see them side by side. Is that okay? Do you have yours?
Sure, yeah. And mine are maybe not as defined, but data gathering / collection, research into what other jurisdictions do, defining the communication pathways, for example, between SEJC, Council, and the task force itself, defining the process. That's a little vague in my mind, but defining the process for what we want to do short, middle, and long term, and then improving citizen input.
So as I was listening, I would like to offer, and I can't remember who said it, it's just like, can we pick 3 bullet points? And I think that, to really prioritize and create an umbrella. And so I just want to offer what I've heard. And I may word it a little different, so forgive me, but examining policies and practices, I think is one thing I heard. And that would include data collection. It would include a lot of different things, I think, to put that under the umbrella. So examining policy and practices, research best practices. So really looking at what are those things that have worked for people, what has not worked, maybe there's some best practices in other spaces. And then I heard communication numerous times and in different ways. So I feel like maybe there's a word for a communication process, establishing a communication process. But I feel like those 3 big bullets are a lot of work, by the way, but they all kind of encompass a lot of the work that can be done so that you're not kind of putting yourself in a box of what the group will do. I do suspect that gives great guidance for whoever this working group is. If I was coming in on this task force, that would be pretty clear to me, but it also is very broad. So it gives us kind of the opportunity to have those discussions and then hone in on what are going to be those priorities that fall under those buckets. And really then, of course, I think the big picture is that task force then informs and makes recommendations to City Council. So I just wanted to add that piece of the purpose of that group is what do they do with that work? Then it's to inform and to make recommendations to City Council. So I wanted to just add that piece in. So I don't know if that helps a little bit to really kind of center in on what the focus could be and then not be so too focused because you want to let that group be the ones to really develop what those key focus areas are. But I feel like you had 3 buckets: communication, examine policies, practices, do research. And all of that would then inform the work of city leadership. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, so are you saying 3 or 4 bullet points? I think 4.
I think I heard.
I
think it's yeah. It felt like a 4th one, but I want to say like the overarching purpose of this group is to inform and make recommendations, right? And I want to say that might be just the big piece, so that group understands our role is to inform and make recommendations. That's it. It's not to be an oversight. So you have to call it out, like what they're doing. Their role is to just inform, right? It's not that they make recommendations. That is not your charge. They're not going to charge you with anything, right? You all as City Council are making those decisions. So I think that's important to call it out of what the role of that group is. So maybe that was a separate bullet, but I think the 3 big things that the group will do, through that, they will examine policies and practices, do research, and then they will also establish some form of kind of communication process, which I think if the community can really help in that process as well. So does that help a little bit with the group? I think Greg had a thought.
But if Chair Downs.
You can go first. I didn't mean to cut you off, Mr. Mayor. Or were you about to?
Oh, no. Go ahead.
So I think I appreciate all three of the things on the table, and I think there's a fair amount of commonality just to the pieces. I'm personally not committed to 3 versus 4 or even 5. I think obviously you don't want to have 17.
Right.
But I don't think that there's an inherent problem between 3 and 5. The piece of what Nicole's, I think, captures a good deal of it, with the inform and make recommendations as the overall purpose, and the sort of bullet points to be the process by examining policies and practices. Now here, what I'd like for us to be clear on is that we're asking the next group to examine a wide range of policies and practices, right? That might include advisory body, might include oversight commission, but it also might, as far as I can understand, it theoretically could include specific policies and practices of the department. So if that's what we mean, then we should, just do that. Make sure that we're saying that. On the communication, I think we have 2 pieces, and we can decide which of these needs to be in the main charge. One of which is communication about the meetings and getting the word out, which is important. And I think we can all agree it's important. I appreciate the efforts of staff to get the word out through the kiosks and those other things. And I also feel like, isn't everything, there are always ways to do better. And I recognize it's a particularly challenging time to get the word out. The other aspect, though, of the communication that I think we want to make sure that I think was in your formulation, Mr. Mayor, though it might be different, though I don't want to put words in your mouth, is what citizen input means. And so that citizen input into the next group, but also citizen input into policing. And some of that is built into the word of communication or dialogue. But I think we want to do something more than encourage it. Right? We want to somehow look for ways of formalizing it. Even a advisory or a group would look to formalize that. So I did like that the sense of the centrality of citizen input was in your particular bullet points. But I think if we agree that it's inherent in the bullet points that Nicole suggested, and that policies, procedures is defined broadly, then I think that hers work.
Well, so Nicole had, oh goodness, did I just lose it? No, okay. Establishing communication process, that could include improving citizen input, if Ms. Anderson was okay with that. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Mayor Pilch, I think what I'd add to Chair Downs is even something that Dr. Shelley also mentioned about the transparent communication and helping the community understand the process. So even after those, in that process of establishing communication, that there's also a conversation at the end of each of those task force meetings. One of the key outcomes should be, okay, what are our talking points that we're going to share with the community after this meeting? Because I think that's going to be really important, not convoluted notes, not like, our normal governance notes and meeting minutes, which the community doesn't always understand those. I think having real clear talking points after each meeting is something that should be part of the process, so that it really is kind of a win-win for everybody, right? We're all understanding, here's the work. No, we haven't gotten where everyone wants us to be, but there is progress being made. We're celebrating small wins along the way. I think that's going to be really powerful for this working group. And again, with the community being on this working group, I think there's gonna be bright ideas about how to do that. So I don't think we have to, try to figure that out tonight, right? Because I think that's the point of having this task force. So if that helps, I don't know if we're all good with that. I think the last piece that I, as a consultant, would really be curious about is, okay, what is going to be the process to now outreach to the community to even be a part of this? And maybe that's not all established tonight, but maybe there's a sense of what stakeholder groups do we want to ensure we include in this conversation? And then maybe there are public comments that will help, with that piece, so that you're not missing anyone, and be okay with the process being kind of open too. So that was the only other thought I had.
Yeah, that's one of the next sub agenda items. So we'll get there soon, I think. And so I wanted to check in those, Ms. Anderson's bullet points sound good to me, and they seem like they incorporate most of the ideas that we've all had. Any more input on that? Vice Mayor?
I think they do sound good. What I would suggest we do is kind of percolate them a little bit, not decide right now this is absolutely set in stone because we are coming back, but let this sort of be to sit for a time with us and to move on to the composition of the committee.
Yeah. Okay.
And
yeah, that sounds good to me. That sounds good to me. And if there's no further comment on that, that's a good point. We will be revisiting this in our next meeting. So I think we can move on now to item B under the second three, which is the composition and appointment procedures. So Vice Mayor, did you want to lead us off? It sounded like you had some ideas on that.
Yeah, I do. What I'd like to see us do is to try to select people from as many diverse groups of people in the city that we can. So what I'm thinking of, and just as a kickoff point, is to have like 2 representatives from various groups, and then each council member appoint one person. Sorry, the fire department's going by. Always working. So I would suggest that we have people from the business community, from our faith-based community, youth members, members from the school district, members from our senior community, members of the diverse housing working group, and council appointed members. And that would give us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12, 17 people, which, you know, we don't want it to be too huge, but we don't want it to be too small either. And what I would hope out of all of that is that we would get a broad spectrum of the community and people perhaps that we don't usually see. And what I'm thinking to get the word really out and to show that we are serious about this and we really want to reach out to people is to do some kind of a mailing, a postcard mailing to the community. Nicole Elbinger, maybe you could just round number how much that would cost us. So we can kind of think about if that's feasible.
Yeah, something to round number to be brought back for the next time, you mean?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So you had a pretty, I want to make sure I understand, you had a pretty exact figure there of 17. So it sounds like for each one of these categories, then you must have a number in mind of how many from each of these groups you're asking for.
I would suggest 2 from each group.
Okay, I see.
And you know, obviously this is just starting the discussion. It's not the end of the discussion.
Right, certainly, yeah. And I just wanted to make sure I understood what your starting suggestion was. So thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that suggestion. Others, please.
Could we just recount? I got, I think, 5 of the 6 groups, but I didn't get all 6.
I can, do you mind, Vice Mayor, if I repeat so I make sure that I got it right?
Sure.
I had got business community, faith community, youth, school district, seniors, a diverse housing working group, and then council appointed members.
Correct.
And 2 from each, except for council appointed members, of course, would be 5.
Right. And what I was thinking was, like, for youth, it just as an example, if we had an application with like a checkbox, you're seeking to represent the youth, and you just check that box, because I'm not quite sure how otherwise that would work. So there'd sort of be some that the council appointed at large, for lack of a better term. Does that make sense? I'm seeing puzzled faces. Let me try it again. There's no group that can appoint a use, so it would have to come from the council.
I see what you're saying.
It wouldn't necessarily be one of our 5. It would be more of an at-large. The council saw these, looked at the applications and picked 1 or 2 of the use applications.
Got it. Yeah, so we might the different groups will have different procedures for selecting the members of the group.
You know, for example, the business community, perhaps the Chamber and the Solano Avenue Association could handle that application process. You know, we can kind of massage this as we go along.
Just asking a point. Yeah, just a point of clarity. I love you know, kind of have those buckets of stakeholder groups, which I think is a really good start. My brain keeps going to the word diversity and diverse, you know, representation. And I think that, you know, within each of those buckets, there is a diverse group of people who would exist. And I think I don't want to define what diversity is, because I think it comes from a lot of different versions of, you know, it could be language, it could be ethnicity, it could be culture, it could be sexual orientation, religion. It could be so many different nuances of diversity, and Albany has a lot of it. So I say that to say, I like how you're starting with the buckets, but I wonder if there's some openness about in that application process and in those kind of key partners you want to reach out and say, hey, can you help us kind of outreach to your business community, to your housing community, your faith community, that there's some clarity and real, you know, desire about we want to have a diverse representation. Because what I do fear is that some of the public comments that have not just happened in Albany, but I think this is happening in a lot of spaces, is that the same people somehow show up on these type of task force, right? And the people who have the most access, the people who are most in tune. And so I even think about, you know, you have homeless families, and I don't know if I heard that through the diverse housing working piece, but, you know, you have homeless families who, just by the sheer nature of what homeless means, there's a lot of different versions of that. But making sure that you really have every single, you know, as much of a diverse representation as possible. And that may be awkward, right? I think even having children on there, you know, how young do you go as far as having youth representation? I think it's really important to think about it. So I say all that to say, in the application process, just making sure, you know, that may be a next step in the conversation of what you actually put on the application to really determine like who is on these on this task force. Because I don't want you to turn back and kind of be right back at the same starting point of you have the community upset that the whole purpose of this was to bring a diverse, you know, kind of voice to the table, and then that doesn't happen just by the sheer nature of the process, which is typical and it's not an Albany thing. It's just a power structure that exists. And so I just want to, you know, speak to that. And also just, you know, echo the thought of, you know, different versions of how you outreach to people. And the mailing is a great idea, electronic. And obviously the COVID-19, you know, kind of status makes it hard to do physical outreach. But I think there's some creative ways to do this. And definitely maybe some partners that you'd have to reach out to help in the process, by the way. So I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you. So are you suggesting, I might have heard that you're suggesting an alternative process, perhaps, where we say that we would like, we state that we would like diversity in these groups, but we open it more to not necessarily 2 people from this and 2 people from that, but we examine all the applicants with the lens of these are the diverse groups that we want, or but maybe I got that wrong.
Yeah, no, thanks for that question. So yes, I think you're hearing me correctly. And one of the things I didn't say is, to be clear, is that you had Vice Mayor McQuaid, you know, mentioned kind of the 6 groups of people. So I think, sorry, got cut off. I think you have to have a starting point, right? You don't want to be spinning the wheel. So you have a kind of a body you've already identified, you know, those groups, those partnerships you already have. So using them to really help do the outreach is what really is happening. But be clear in your vision, in that outreach, you don't want to have the same people, the shoulder tapping that happens, right? You want to have a little bit of both, right? You want to shoulder tap the people who you know can do the outreach, but you want to be clear about, look, we don't want the same old people every single time, and not to disrespect that group of people, because I represent one of those in my community, right? People always tap on me, you know, to come and help, but I really think it needs to be very concerted effort that you have a diverse group. And that you be clear in that kind of outreach to those kind of buckets of partners in the community. And then in the application process, you may have, 50 people that want to be on it. So then you have the dilemma of, okay, we got to eliminate some folks, but have another clear conversation to the community that although you're not on the task force, here's the avenue that you still can contribute. And I think that has to be really important, that people know that there's not space for everyone on here, but there is a space for you to contribute. And that's where those buckets go back to the business community, that there has to be a place, and this goes back to communication, that people can always engage in this work, even if they can't make it to meetings, they can't make this commitment. So I want to say those two. And so hopefully, Mayor Pilch, that helps clarify a little bit your question that you asked.
I think so. Let's see if we can get some, if there's any other input. Yeah, Chair Downs.
Thanks. I appreciate that input, which I think makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate the Vice Mayor's proposal and the breadth of groups that she's looking at. I just have a couple of questions about how it would work. So is the idea of a model like the application process for commissions, where there would be a link on the city website? How do we make that work in a time where paper, applications, might or might not be available? Or is the idea of some other model? And then the second piece of that is for the areas where there is not a defined body, right? Some of the bodies she mentioned are, the diverse working housing group, right? So you ask them whatever their mechanism is, then I assume council trusts that their mechanism, works for their group, and they name people. You ask the school district, and either you define that as asking the board or asking the superintendent, or however that works. But for the ones that are more nebulous, I'm just curious about what's the mechanism for council decision on that. Is the idea essentially that council will end up debating all 12 of the at-large selections? And if so, does that create how will that work? Will it make more sense if we want something of that size to just do something where the ability to get names, where you can have something wide, but the ability to get names is smoother and faster, so that it doesn't, so that the process doesn't take weeks or months. We want to take all the time we need to get people who are engaged and from different communities. But I wouldn't want it to be hung up, sort of indefinitely, and the difficulty of making those kind of decisions. So you could imagine trying to reach the same goal through a different mode of each council member names 3 people, and you establish this as the goals of how they name them, or council members and commissioners, or however you do it. So I just wonder about those as 2 ways of the mechanism of getting to this end goal.
Thank you for that.
Was that a question to me or to the whole body?
I'm glad for you to answer it. Sort of, which of these did you imagine did you picture being attached to specific groups? And then what's the council, how do you see the council process for the ones that aren't attached to, for either the ones that are attached to specific groups and the ones that are not? How do we actually get to the number at the end?
Well, let's see. I think the business community would be a specific recommendation from the business community. The school district, the same. And the diverse housing working group would be the same. And I always want to include the faith community in everything we do, but I'm not sure that we have a really cohesive, some communities have, council of churches or whatever. We don't really have that. But I put them in there so we can kind of talk about that. But I think as far as youth or seniors would be the 2 that we don't really have a body to recommend them. And like I said, I'm just back of the envelope thinking that they could apply, and the council as a whole could look at them And I think as Nicole was saying, we might need to be plugging people in to be sure that we get a really broad spectrum of people. And maybe people, we certainly want different people. So the council may need to look at it that way as we're picking from those two groups. But I'm more than willing to hear what other people have to say.
Go ahead, Dr. Holt.
Just a point of clarification, because Vice Mayor, I'm right along aligned with your thinking. Who will be doing the choosing of the people for the committee? Who's choosing? Like, if you get the applications, who are the applications coming to? And let me put that in context. Where I'm hearing, and first of all, what I'm hearing is great. This is exactly where you need to be going. The categories, the differentiation, the diversity is exactly where you need to be going. But my question is, who is going to get this? Because who's getting it will determine how deep this committee needs to go into the logistics of how that's chosen. So if we say, if the staff is the one choosing, and I'm not saying that is where it should be, Nicole, I don't know. But if the staff is the one choosing, then this committee just needs to say, well, this is what we want. We want business, faith, youth members, We want a wide range. We want people that we haven't heard from before, and go forth and make this happen. If it's this committee choosing, then again, we're just kind of setting within ourselves, this is what we're looking for, and then you await the applications to come in, or however we are deciding to run this process, and then you decide from there. So that's why I'm asking the clarified question, who's choosing to assess how deep we need to go here in this conversation about participation, or is it just, these are the parameters, and now we'll figure that out when the people come?
I anticipate that it would be the council would be doing the final approving. I think an example that we have of this is the Economic Development Committee, where the Chamber and the Solano Avenue Association each recommend somebody to be on that committee. And then council ratifies it. So council isn't exactly choosing, but we are ratifying it. I think you're
yeah,
muted,
it does raise. Sorry. It does raise a good question of, I hadn't thought about, I immediately went to the council because that's what often the council does, is the choosing of people for bodies. Although we could designate this body to do that as well. It is a choice. For the members, so there is, if we go with 5 council appointed and then certain members from bodies, and then the other members that are not of the organized body, like the youth, then those people, that's a little tougher, because then you do have to have what I can imagine, if we go that way and we have this group of youth and others to pick from, what I would recommend to be some sort of voting system where the council members or this body members would each vote on the people that they think should be in, and then we tally the vote and see where we come up with. Anyway, those are my thoughts off the top of my head. Anyone else?
Mayor Pilch, I think that it should be this body, if not the whole body, maybe select 2 of us to review the applications, possibly report back to the task force team saying this is what we reviewed based on whatever guidelines and perimeters questions we put in place. Once we've done that, we can, sorry about that. We can present it or make the recommendation to the city council to ratify who we would want to be on the group. I mean, we're setting the framework. We know what we want on the members to look like and how we would like them to represent us. So I think we should do that. Or like I said, pick a couple, 2 people from this group to do the application process.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, Dr. Holt.
All right, and I had one more thing I wanted to point out. As I was looking at this group, and I'm kind of looking directly at you, Police Chief. We're talking about a police task force, and I don't see police. And so, how do we see the police involvement with this? And I want to make sure, and I'm always very sensitive to this just because of who I am, but I also want to look at police, but also police families. So maybe police wives or something like that, because that's what we don't look at in this work. And having done this work a little bit, that's a group that is often discounted, but man, are they powerful, and they can totally derail your efforts if you don't involve them. I'm just saying, behind every good man, and I'm not trying to be stereotypical at all, but they go home to some women, and just saying. So I just want to throw that out there to the group of, how do we look at the police involvement and recognizing that police come to us as whole beings. They are not just officers in uniform, they are men from families. So how are we looking at that involvement? And thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, good comments. I am personally thinking, my thinking is changing in that this group, I think, would be a good group to further discuss and further choose the members of the next body. The council might not have the background or the context to do that as effectively as this group might. And I do think that the police representation, it seems like could be very would be essential. But Vice Mayor, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it was never my intent the police wouldn't be there. They are the staff. They would certainly be there. I look at this committee like all of our other advisory bodies. They are advisory bodies to the council. The council selects all of the other advisory bodies, with the caveat that economic justice has that unique situation where the business community recommends people. I would certainly stick to that model.
So you're saying that we could discuss the candidates, the applicants, and then have the council do the final ratification. Is that what you're saying, or something else?
I'm saying that they would apply just like any other advisory body does. Whatever the name we give becomes a what is that? I can't remember what it's called. When there's an advisory body opening, and it works that way through the Maddie Act. So it's simply another advisory body of the city council. So I don't know why we would do it any other way.
Okay. I'll just offer, some thoughts as far as the application process, because this may bring clarity to that. I think Vice Mayor McQuaid, I agree. Like, I don't know if you want to reinvent any processes right now. I think the processes that you use, if you use that, I think it's fine. I just think with the caveat that the difference with this process is that you have very specific needs for this task force. And I think calling out that, again, that diverse representation is what the community is asking for, and being very transparent about access to the process, I think, is the difference. So I think the technical piece of it, the city council has a role. So I don't think anyone should take that role. But I do want to say in the application process that specific questions should be included in there so that when those applications are reviewed, you can make a sound, informed decision and really have what you identify as a diverse group. And then again, with the caveat that there may have to just be clear communication, that everyone can't be on it, and acknowledge that, because there's a lot of people who may show interest, but that there has to be a clear avenue for them to still give input and to still be a part of the process, even though they may not be, on the official task force. So I just want to say that, because I think that's the difference with this group, is you have very specific lens around, we want to address this with diverse perspective. And again, empowering groups of people who have not had a voice in any process. This is a great time to be able to really shift how you do inform other processes as well. So I just wanted to say that, and hopefully that's helpful. And in the process. And I don't know if today is the day to come up with all of the details of the application, but I definitely will share, save that for the next meeting to share some of the questions you may want to consider in that application so that you can have that informed data.
Okay. Okay, so we don't have to make final decisions here. Although, I'd like to move forward as quickly as possible. I think it is an option to make the final decision on the process next meeting. What else did I want to say? I wanted to say, but yeah, so the council should definitely be well informed. If the council is making choices, the council should be well informed of what this body expects or what this body wants. So we should make sure that council has that communication, and that at the council meeting where we ratify that that this group has a voice to say that please be aware of what the needs of this working body here. I want to come back to the police participation. You brought up a good, you made me think, Vice Mayor, that the police technically are staff, but as staff, they don't have that voice that the electeds and the appointed and the consultants here do. So I'm of two minds here. I want them to have a bit of a stronger voice rather than just the staff that sits back and answers the questions that need to be answered. So I'm not sure how to deal with that. You know what I mean?
No.
Go ahead, Vice. Oh, I'm sorry.
And I also agree. I think the community wants that as well. I mean, they want to have that. I think it'll be a way for the community to have that one-on-one or build that relationship with the police staff. So I would agree. I don't know to what magnitude we want them to get involved in it, but I think they should have a presence as well.
Well, maybe I wasn't clear. I
Okay.
don't assume there'll be staff sitting at the back of the room not participating. I still look at this as a community dialogue with the police department, and hopefully, it won't be just the chief that'll be able to be there, that maybe other officers can come and we have a real discussion. And that's my hope. So it never occurred to me that they wouldn't be there, or that they wouldn't be a voting member of the task force. I guess that's how I think of this. I guess that's what I mean by staff, is they're not on the task force, but they're certainly a very important part of it.
Chair Downs.
I wonder if one way, I appreciate the different things at play here, and certainly that dual role is complex. So I wonder if one way of doing it would be to, I'm open to other suggestions, obviously, but whether the Peace Officers Association, if we were designating groups that could suggest people for council to ratify, and then in that case, whoever they choose, we wouldn't, I assume, necessarily require that they choose uniformed people. They could pick retired people or, whoever they want, family members. And that assuming council ratified them, those people would be there in a somewhat different capacity than staff. And so that might allow for a clarity of roles, of inclusion, and also of roles, because I think it's a very important point that Dr. Holt and Janelle made. And I appreciate the Vice Mayor's sense that the police here as staff are going to have a big role, but I also think it's valuable to look at incorporating other people in the process, and in a way that's not going to confuse.
Yeah, Vice Chair, you had your hand up, but I'm not sure you've turned your video off, so you might be indisposed currently. Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, I think that sounds like a very good suggestion to me. I think I got maybe even a nod from the chief as well, that might be a good idea. Or maybe I'm missing. I don't want to put nods on the chief's head, but Chief, did you want to contribute?
No, we're happy to participate in it, and what works with the group too. It can kind of go both ways. Some people may not be happy that we're participating at a certain level too. So I think we kind of, maybe as the group gets formed, we can decide that level of involvement.
Okay.
Can I just say
And
one
then,
last?
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I'm kind of intrigued by that idea of having APOA select somebody, but I would like some guidance, and not tonight, but at some point. That is a union, and I'm a little concerned about a union participating in the task force. Well, I like the idea. I just would like some guidance on that.
Okay. Yeah, we can bring that back.
Can I share a thought about this to maybe help with that question or concern? Because I think this is going to happen with all of the different stakeholders who are on this task force, is that they are going to almost be kind of represent being a liaison, if you want to use that word, right? So they represent the faith-based community, for example. So they will probably all say, I'm not the only one. I don't have the only voice. There are other people who can give input. So I think, understanding that there's going to be some subcommittee work that may come out of this so that the working group can actually really identify some issues. It's very hard to have a task force and, you have 20 people or 17 and everybody's always engaged at the same time. There's going to be, I think, some subcommittee work as well. So that may help with trying to determine, as Chief Geisberger said, you're going to, the group will determine like where people engage. And so I'm even thinking about staff liaisons. And I think Chair Downs mentioned that, right? About like the role of staff versus police, even though they kind of represent staff as a whole, there's going to be the staff behind the scenes who are going to be impacted by things like, hey, what about this data that we need? Because to go back to examining policies and practices and doing research, somebody has to do that work. So I think there's the other piece of those staff liaisons. And because you have a small department, a small city structure, those roles are going to have to be really determined, but just recognize that there may be spaces where you're going to have that subcommittee kind of liaison position. And that's where others may be able to be involved kind of indirectly, if that makes sense. So that it really works well for the group. So I don't know if that helps a little bit, because I think down the road, that's where you're going to end up going. The whole group is not going to be able to tackle everything. And so I think you can kind of wrestle with people's roles when you get to that bridge. And identify what are the challenges, what are the things this group is even going to address. And then I think you can determine those structures as you evolve. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Thank you very much. And it looks like Dr. Holt wanted to add a few words.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, that's kind of where I was going when I asked the question about the process. Because if the process is that, this committee is going to choose, then with each of these groups, then with the seniors, we would look at the senior community and figure out who are going to be the representatives for the senior community. Because it's one thing to choose people, it's another thing to choose people to represent a group. So are you just choosing people who are part of a group, or are you choosing people to represent a group? And if you're choosing people to represent a group, which is, and I don't want to put words in the vice mayor's mouth around this, but she mentioned those 6 groups and then 5 people that were going to be chosen by each of the committee members. Then we need to go to the seniors and say, okay, who do you want to represent? Go to the
uh-oh. He's still with us, Doctor? I think we might have encountered.
Normally, I would finish her sentence. Yeah, I'd usually finish her sentence, but I'm not sure what to say. So ... We'll come back to her. But hopefully you were getting the gist of that with the role of everyone that's going to be on there. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I could piggyback on that, because I'm looking at the groups that the vice mayor defined, and seems like, business community, that's pretty clear. School district, pretty clear. Diverse housing working group, pretty clear. Council appointed members, pretty clear. And then there's then I have senior, faith, and youth. So those aren't bodies. There's no bodies there. Those are just types of folks. So I'm more comfortable. I'll put it out. Let me put this out there. I'm more comfortable if we say, take that group and those groups and expand on it and say, in our communication now, we say we are looking for diverse representation, including senior, faith, youth, people from the LGBTQ community, people from, you know, what, and if we left anyone out, we're sorry, you know, including as diverse a list of people we can, and then just see what, you know, the applications that come in are, and use that diversity focus in our choices. I'm seeing a nod from Ms. Anderson. Anyone else? Would anyone else have an opinion about that? Chair Downs.
If you wanted to do that in a way that's sustained, I think the goals, at least as I understood it, or the mechanism of size and range that Vice Mayor suggested, you know, you could sort of define your number of groups, whether it's 3 or 4, and then either double or triple the number of people that council members appoint. And in that way, you know, if the goal is to make sure that it's a relatively larger group, and to give more range for council members to try and address that, and if they have 2 appointments or even 3 or some other mechanism, you could get to a, you know, to ratification possibly a little more smoothly.
So just so I understand your suggestion, that was not to have the 4 defined groups, business school, 3 defined groups, business school, diverse housing working group, and then leave it to the council members to make sure they have diversity in their 1, 2, or 3 appointments. Did I capture that?
A thought of how to get from here to there. I mean, I'm also, as I said,
Okay.
open to the idea that one of the groups would be the peace officers, though I understand the Vice Mayor's concern about designating a union, and maybe there's some other way to allow for that representation.
So we've got a number of ideas on the table. We could, in the interest of not having too long a meeting, we could let them percolate and make a final decision at the next meeting. I'm getting some head nods on that. So any final words on the formation then, before we move on to our last item? Well, thank you all. Some really great ideas there. And welcome back, Doctor. I hope your computer's okay.
Zoom interrupted, and I'm not appreciating it.
It happens. Okay. So our last item will be the reporting structure and timeline. And after that, we do have a defined next meeting, which is August 24th at 4 p.m., which will 11 days from now. So that's good. That's pretty close. Reporting structure and timeline. What do we have to say about that? Ideas, Vice Mayor?
Well, I guess the reporting structure is fairly simple, because I think we all agree that the end product of this group is to make recommendations back to the council. So that's kind of easy, probably a pro-con analysis, that kind of thing that we've tried to do in the past. As far as timeline, I would like to suggest a 6 months, meeting once a month timeline, with an option of the council extending it for another, say, 3 months, because we want them to, get their work done, and we also want to give people that are interested an idea. This is not a lifetime commitment, and it doesn't meet every night, and so we're actually asking people to do what we want them to do. We're giving this is what we're looking at. It's going to be once a month for 6 months, maybe another 3. can you work with us on this rather than just, you want to be on this and it might be years or, whatever. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me. The other thing and I don't think we have to decide tonight, but I'd kind of like us to think about, with this many people and the limited time and space to have city meetings, it might make some sense to have at least an idea of when they're going to meet, so that we're not asking 17 people to fill out a doodle poll once they're all appointed, or more than that. So it might be something to think about, but probably not tonight.
Yeah, I think staff could come back with us with evenings or late afternoons that are not currently filled with other repeating meetings.
There must be one.
I think there are. Any comments? Other ideas? Comments on what the Vice Mayor said? And just a note: I did not give the public a chance to weigh in on the last section, and I apologize for that. But I think this section is probably seems like it might be short, so I will definitely ask for public comment in a moment on both sections B and C. Go ahead, Chair.
Clearly, I think what the Vice Mayor said seems reasonable, but I just want to make sure, I think was also said this was something to contemplate and that we decide. Is that right? Decide at the next meeting or a future meeting. Is that right?
Yeah,
I think so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
What I was going to say is we might even be able to get one thing firmed up tonight and go with the timeline. I think whether we want to have an established date before we get too far in this might be something to look at later.
Yeah, certainly we can always bring it back. We can always bring it back to the next meeting, but if there's no strong opposition to that suggestion, we'll leave that as the working suggestion until otherwise changed. We could do it that way.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just
Doctor.
wanted to add a comment that when you're looking at the 6 months with once a month meeting timelines, once the committee is established, if we're really looking at, I went back real quick to the 3 goals that you mentioned, and even though there are 3 goals in kind of 3 areas, but if we're really looking at them making a recommendation to the city council, developing something around data and research, and developing something around communication to present to the team, 6 months with a possible 3-month extension would be more than enough time once it's established, recognizing that it's going to take some time for it to be established. So I just want to say that, especially for the public who's thinking, okay, I'm going to be on a committee next week. No. Realistically, you may be on a committee starting around November, maybe December, once we get through the application process and get everything going. So, and I just want to say that because oftentimes people have these unrealistic expectations. Well, they had the meeting in August. George Floyd died back in March. Why are we taking so long? Why is it not happening yesterday? It's just a matter of timing. So with what she said, that's very doable once it's established. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for setting expectations on that. I certainly know how these things can, the process just takes how long it takes sometimes. I do want to mention something I forgot to mention earlier, which is I really appreciate hearing back on the cost of a mailing, because I think the mailing can be a very effective outreach tool. And it, unfortunately, though, is also the most expensive outreach tool. So that's why you don't see the city sending out postcards all the time, because the mail costs money, a lot more money, certainly than electronic distribution. So
Mayor, I'm happy to give you a ballpark on that. It's probably about $8,000 compared based on recent mailings.
Okay, that's for a postcard size.
Right.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So certainly can be worth the money, but it's good to know the budget as well. Why don't I just go ahead and let the public weigh in again at this point, since I've unfortunately neglected them absentmindedly, and see if there's any more public comments at this point on items B or C before we wrap it up. And I do see one hand having gone up, and go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to start off by thanking Nicole from the city for posting in the kiosk. I wanted to acknowledge that happened, so I really appreciate that happening. I have like several notes, but one of them is about the makeup of this committee. I think the disadvantage to having representatives from different groups is that, and I think somebody else made this point, and I can't remember who it was, is that you're going to leave out a lot of people. For example, I'm technically, I guess, a senior. Hate to acknowledge it, but technically I am. But I don't go to the senior center. I have no interaction with them. And I think that that's going to be true for a lot of people. You have homeschooled kids, so they won't be involved with the high school or the school district. You're going to have, well, let's see, looking to see who else, the youth business people, maybe small businesses that don't belong to the business association. I don't know how that works, but anyway, I think that I really like the idea of having an application that was saying this is like, it may have been Shelley that said this, but this is what we're looking for. This is kind of the makeup of the group that we're hoping for. We'd like to see seniors, we'd like to have youth, we'd like to have people from the faith community, et cetera, rather than going to a group, because also there's the tendency for groups, I think, to pick their favorites or people that always speak up a lot or get a lot of attention or whatever it is. And it's much, much better to have it come from the community, and rather than have it already broken down into some group that some people may not belong to. And then the second thing, the postcards, I think is a great idea. Just want you to keep in mind the people experiencing homelessness who may not have a mailing address. I also would encourage you to involve the library in any kind of outreach that you're doing. A lot of people who are experiencing homelessness, or a lot of people in the community, the library is very busy, and they would be a great place to try to get the word out. Have maybe encourage them to put a bookmark, for example, that goes into all the books. When somebody checks out a stack of books, there's this pile of bookmarks that would tell people about the meetings, about the upcoming meetings, or tell people about the application, or even have paper applications there where you could, in a box from the community where you could just drop off the application, so you don't have to worry about mailing it or finding someplace else to drop it off. I know the library is closed right now, but they are doing, they will eventually open, and also they are doing curbside pickup. So that would be, you could still have a stack of bookmarks, you could still have a box, you could still have paper applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was the only hand that I saw raised. Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you for that. That'll end the public comment for today. Were there any final comments from the members of this group?
Thank you.
Well, if not, yeah, thank you. I certainly want to express my appreciation for everyone taking the time today and the great ideas that have been put forth. And thank you to the consultants for doing the work of and hard work of synthesizing this and coming back to us with something we can look at next time and put a seal on. And any other last words? Last words is maybe not a great phrase, not a great way to put it, but final statements. Still not good. Anyway.
Well, I will send you these notes just so you know I've taken notes of the meeting and categorized them. I will send them to you. And I just want to echo that just because a group is representing someone, we might want to flesh that out. If we want groups to represent, they really got to know that that's what they're doing. They're not representing who they are. They're representing a faction of society or a faction of the community. And that's key. Otherwise, it can go kind of haywire. And I'll send these to you as soon as we end the call.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. And that's the sort of thing that I think is very valuable to get from our consultants. So thank you for that. That input is going to be important. Okay, let me just check the agenda, make sure
Okay.
that we am covering everything. Next meeting, as I mentioned, August 24th, also at 4 p.m. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. And thanks once again. And thank you to everyone, all the members of the public who joined. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.